I think it's this one. Can you hear me? Hello?
Oh yeah, 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 I can hear you now.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh boy, technology. That's my mom. Okay, let's start this over.
Thank
Boy,
you,
boy,
sir.
boy.
Thank you.
Wow, we couldn't hear, so I'm glad that I had somebody listening. All right, here we go. Stories of the Soul radio show. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. Today is September the 5th, 2021. Today is my actual first show. So, hey, do me a favor. I need you guys to go ahead and share this information for me so we can kind of get it out to the mass communities. I have special guests in studio on today. His name is Minister Timothy Webster. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome.
Right. We also have in studio, which we will be hearing from a little later, his beautiful wife and my children's grandmother, Miss Genevieve Webster. I want to thank both of you for coming in. So let me just do a quick introduction.
Your children's mother.
What did I say?
Much.
We live. Don't be. Anyway, she is my grandchildren's mother. I know what I said. Ain't that what I said? What did I say? Well, they knew what I meant. Yes, so today we're going to be talking about suicide. But before I get into that, I want to just do a quick introduction. So I asked Minister Webster to be my first guest because, for one, he's a minister. For number two, he's a male. And I also wanted to bring his expertise in as it relates to suicide within the Black community and some things that I was taught coming up surrounding suicide. And um, I wanted him to kind of share feedback on that as it relates to the Bible. You know, yeah. So before I get into all that, today is September the 5th, Suicide Awareness Month. And I didn't know that when I first decided to talk about suicide. So when I finally got the final confirmation to get my show, I asked God, I said, God, please direct me on what it is you want me to say to your people. And as I was on social media, it just popped up that Little Wayne tried to kill himself. He's for those of you who don't know who that is, he's a rapper. And my mind, I was like, wow, he's somebody that's rich, and I can just imagine, he probably has experienced just about everything in life that he could ever probably imagine. What would make somebody of his caliber want to commit suicide? You know, my earliest memory of suicide was when I was a little girl. There was two twin brothers who lived on the street that I grew up on, and one of the brothers tried to kill himself.
Mhm.
No, he did. He actually killed himself, and I was told it was because of his girlfriend left him. Right,
Mhm.
and I didn't understand. I'm like, ooh, he going to hell,
Right.
because as a young girl, I was taught that if you commit suicide, that's one of the sins that God will never forget,
Mhm.
and you would go to hell. Now, where they got that from, can you ask her
Good.
to respond to these texts for me? I don't know why people texting me, they know I'm live. Jen, can you do me a favor and respond to these two texts for me?
I'll give it to her.
One is from here,
There you go.
and then my mom's trying to call. I think she's trying to get on. So, anyway, excuse me. So, if you're trying to get on live, you need to, oh, well, you won't see this if you're not on, huh? Never mind. Never mind. So coming up, I was taught that if committed suicide, it was like one of the worst sins, and God won't forgive you. And as I have become an adult,
Along with many other things we was taught.
oh yeah, oh that's absolutely true. As an adult, I've learned that that is not true because I didn't find it anywhere in the Bible, But you can talk to that where it says if you commit suicide, you'll go to hell and God doesn't forgive you. And one more thing that I also wanted to say is that, I have a daughter that was 2.5 years old that passed away, your sister.
Mhm.
And when I was at her funeral and I was speaking, I remember saying that I didn't really want to be here anymore. And I'll never forget, there were several people in the crowd that was like, oh, it was a negative comment. And even though I was grief stricken in that moment, I remembered that that's very negative, and it even made me forget my thought of what I was trying to say. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people that I've talked to within the Black community have expressed, they'll say things like, "Oh, well, Black people don't commit suicide," but I'm here to tell you that's not true,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, before I turn it over to you, what is suicide, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
suicide is the act or instance of taking one's own life voluntarily or intentionally, right? So, as far as I know, because you've never expressed that to me, you haven't tried to commit suicide or thought about it, but you can speak to that, So, just coming from your background,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what is it that you want to say to the people when it relates to suicide if they're contemplating it or thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it?
Well, just in my experience, I've personally never come to the point at at wanting to take my own life. Of course, thank God, and but I still have a lot of life left, right? And who knows what the
Amen.
future holds? I hope and pray that I would stay grounded and find the right people and the right help and resources in the event that I did feel like taking my own life. But suicide discussion. I first want to say you already gave the definition of suicide, but suicide discussions are good for those who are suicidal in the general population, just in general. I think the more we talk about things, the more aware we come about it. It brings light to it, and I think suicide for me has always been one of those topics personally where I just don't really talk about because I feel like it's not something I deal with, right? But it doesn't mean that there's not people that I'm in company with on a consistent basis, on a whether it be work, whether it be my family, whether it be my local community or my church that's dealing with it. And it's really important. And I'll kind of talk, when we get further, I kind of want to talk about some of the signs and the symptoms that are important to be cognizant of it so you're proactive instead of reactive, right? Um,
I,
Speaking to the mic. Okay. I'm sorry about that, you all. And so I would say one of the mistakes we make with different tragedies and bizarre things is we say what we would or what we would or we would not do. And I'm sure a lot of people who contemplated or actually committed suicide had a turning point or boiling point that led to the emotions to do so. So many of us would have never thought we would do or attempt a lot of things in life. So I think it's important to understand that it's something that is real and there are some people that do experience, so just having an open mind about it, to discuss it and be considerate of what people could be going through, or what they could be feeling. It is something that's real. To speak off, to piggyback off of uh, the example and experience you gave as far as the responses that you heard when you were just sharing with how you felt. The reality is most people who were listening to you were not in your shoes or your position,
mm-hmm.
right? You hear different experiences and from different people and testimonies, and we naturally are kind of like, oh, I would never do that, right? But you really don't know what you would or you wouldn't do if you have not been in a particular space or experience as that person, regardless of your relationship with God, regardless of how strong. There's saved people who's contemplated suicide. I believe unsaved people. There's rich people. There's poor people. There's black people. There's white people. Now, statistically, colored people are on the lower end of committing
Mm-hmm.
suicide statistically. But we still, suicide is still a real thing for us, and it's important that it's addressed, it's acknowledged, awareness is brought to it to help have preventatives for it to minimize it as much as possible.
You just brought up a good point. So, statistically, according to the American Foundation for Suicide, 1,038 people have attempted suicide in 2019. When I saw that, I was just like, I didn't know um, that we were in a state of an emergency. And I say emergency because that's a lot of people.
Right.
In 2019, 47,511 Americans actually died by suicide,
Mm-hmm.
right? And according to the National Center for Health Statistics and the suicide mortality by state, so in 2000, for example, 2014 in California, there was 4,214 suicide deaths. Um, Next in line was Florida, but this is the interesting thing. Rhode Island only had 113 suicide deaths in 2014. So then I kind of looked into 2018. California went up. It was 4,491. Rhode Island was 106, and Vermont 125 people.
Hmm.
And I start thinking, wow, what? Why is it such a big, big difference? And lately in the news, I've been hearing a lot of deaths among teenagers.
Hmm.
Not only teenagers, but college students. And my thing is, I believe the education needs to start early.
Hmm.
You know, I have three grandchildren. What are their ages?
They 11, 11, 9, and 8.
Right. So my pastor, Bishop Clark, has always taught us that it's okay to um, like care about something, but you never want to consume yourself with things or people.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying consume them, but I'm just curious. Have you ever had a conversation with them about topics like if something ever was to happen really bad? Have you ever talked to them about like never giving up in those conversations?
We definitely have had, our share of conversations sporadically, about, staying motivated, self love. I try to pull back from, saying you're so pretty, you're so gorgeous all the time, even though I like saying that it's an excitement, they're a piece of me, because I want them to know that who they are and their value is not tied to just how they look or the outer appearance or their skin or their hair, and the different things that they may have from a physical attraction. So I try to pour into to getting them to see the value in who they are and understanding who they are and having a self identity, and self worth is something that I try to be intentional about in its proper place. Suicide directly, we haven't really had
Right, right.
to that degree, but just kind of, self value and self worth. I think
Hmm.
is really important because I think that even taps into heavy relations as to why a person may commit suicide from struggling from seeing the totality of who you are and the value that you bring and how you are important regardless of what you have or what you haven't done.
So that brings up another good point. I feel like some, not all, suicide attempts comes from maybe possibly drug use,
Hmm.
possibly from a mental illness.
Hmm.
And typically, when we hear the word mental illness, we think that it's something negative, right? That means you're crazy. That doesn't mean that at all.
Right.
You know, everybody has a different bandwidth, right?
Hmm.
It may take you a year to get over something. It may take me five,
Right.
and it's important that we recognize
Right.
what that is and look at those warning signs.
Right.
I have a neighbor who, um, his daughter, she was an adult. She passed away unexpectedly. She was having surgery. She died.
Hmm.
Not even a year later, and they shared two children together. Not even a year later, their dad, her husband, he killed himself. And when I asked them, wow, what happened? They said no one seen it coming. So I think that it's important that we check in on one another.
Hmm.
I mean, for me, I've, come a long way and I don't really like sharing my personal business
Hmm.
just because sometimes people, for whatever reason, they get mad at you, they repeat it, or if you can't relate to what I'm going through, you might not give me the best advice. But it's definitely important that we know we have somebody to go to. We have churches, we have family members, but we also have a national hotline, which I want to read. So if there's anybody who's ever contemplated suicide, or if you have those thoughts, you can always call 1-800 273 8255, or you can also call 1-800 suicide. And what I like about these places is that it's confidential. You don't have to worry about it being repeated, or you don't have to worry about people judging you.
Right. Right.
So, from a biblical standpoint, I wanted to ask you, had you ever heard, or did I personally ever teach you that if you commit suicide, that's the worst sin and God won't forgive you? I'm trying to figure out where that came from and where that started because I heard it my entire life.
I've heard it. I didn't hear it from you, but I heard it. But that's just not the case. But I mean, if we're going to talk about things we heard from church and the Bible. And there's a plethora of things we heard that's not necessarily doctrinally correct. And let me say this though, there are a lot of things that are said um, that have the the intent is positive, right?
Hmm.
But it's not necessarily accurate. Um, you know, there are a lot of sins that we commit, right? And who's to say because a person commits suicide, that means that you go to hell.
Hmm.
We're not
Hmm.
saved based on our works.
That's right. That's
So
right.
we the things we do is a result of being saved. And so I can't say because a person has decided to take their lives, um, that means that they were not saved. But what I can say is that it's not healthy, it's not positive, and it impacts the people who you influence or who you are close to, or who has to deal with you. Taking your life, taking matters into your own hands. And in reality, I think from a lot of readings that I've done, a lot of people who commit suicide are trying to get away from something.
Hmm.
They're trying to escape something. And that goes to show you, how materialism and materialistic things have their limitations, right? And a lot of what we feel, and this is not just people who are suicidal, but I think this is all of us. We struggle with um, being comfortable and confident and happy with who we are and what we've accomplished, and it causes us to have those mental issues and illness when you talk about being depressed and
Hmm.
distressed and anxiety and bad behavior and negative thoughts and being angry. When I was doing my readings on suicide, it's kind of funny because when I read all the some of the characteristics or the behavior patterns or the signs, of it, I'm like, wow, I have a lot of those signs. Even though I'm saying I haven't contemplated suicide, I
Hmm.
believe there's different degrees. But there was a chart that I was looking at. If I can get it real quick, uh, let me see. Hopefully, here we go. It says the warning sign. It says threats or comments about killing themselves,
Hmm.
social withdrawal from friends, family, and community. I mean, I have social withdrawals. You wouldn't be able to tell because I'm always talking, but there's times where I just don't want to be bothered or as sociable as I can be when I'm out and about. You just want to disconnect, right? Dramatic mood swings. My wife cracked jokes all the time. Tell me, is it that time of the month for me, right? Because I get my mood swings, right?
Hmm.
Talking, writing, or thinking about death,
Hmm.
right? I think about death, right? I mean, I write about it. I talk about it, and I,
Hmm.
think about impulsive or reckless behavior. I've had my share of impulsive and again, it's different degrees to it. Aggressive behavior, increased alcohol and drug use.
Hmm.
I don't struggle with those, but I have things that I've increased, right? And again, threats or comments about killing themselves. And so, out of these warning signs, I mean, a lot of these have been a part of the things I've experienced in my young life. And again, granted, I haven't experienced some of the same tragedies and fatalities that other people have that will push them to a point of suicide
Hmm.
or wanting to commit it. But the warning signs, they can be so intertwined with our
Hmm.
day to day life that it can be hard to kind of read,
Hmm.
you know, really what a person is dealing with or going through. I was listening to, and I'll let you talk in a second. I was listening to a TED talk by Lori Pritchard, and she was talking about how great of a man her husband was and how great of a father he was. He had 2 degrees. He had his doctor's degree. He had good parents, and he decided to commit suicide on his wife's birthday. And he wrote her a letter. In hindsight, she's able to look back and kind of reflect and see what was going on. But he was just expressing, why he did it, right? And even though he appeared at certain times happy, she talked about how when she really assessed things, there were certain signs he was giving that he
Hmm.
wasn't. She
Hmm.
played a clip of them singing, the kids singing happy birthday to the dad, and he was just like, he wasn't really with it. He was showing signs, or he was saying certain things, he was doing certain things, although verbally he may have been
Hmm.
making it seem like, we're taught to fake it till you make it in
Hmm.
society. We're not
Right.
taught to be transparent and
Hmm.
really say how you feel. We're taught, oh, I'm doing fine, I'm good, when a lot of times we're not good or we're not fine. So it's important for those of us who have not contemplated or have not even attempted to commit suicide to be cognizant and to really be open to hear people out and try to be proactive and ask those questions to your significant other, to your kids, and to different people you close to, your influence. How are you truly feeling, and then actually listen without having a judgment or an opinion, right? And that's
Right.
something I struggle with. I always like to give my opinion, be a problem solver, right? I think I got the answer to everything.
Hmm.
Uh, but the reality is that you really sometimes can't tell what people are feeling. You don't really know the degree
Hmm.
of what's weighing heavy on them to that point of suicide. So just being an ear, right? Just I mean, I honestly, we have the suicide number, and it's, I think that's a good thing to have. But I think a lot of people need somebody that they can connect with to feel comfortable to open up and to say that. Because saying I want to commit suicide, people automatically don't think you're crazy, right? If somebody said it to me when I was 16, 17, I probably, being immature, would have probably been like, why would you want to do that? That's stupid, right? And it's like,
Hmm.
even though it is to a degree not a good thing to do, but when somebody's hurting and tender, you want to be considerate of your delivery
Right.
at how you say things. And even being a preacher and being in church, and you hear certain people vent and they say certain things, and you immediately think of a Bible, a verse, or scripture that answers to that. But you want to be loving and kind at how you present that to a person. And sometimes you just have to wait. Sometimes it's not the right time to tell somebody something, but just listen to
Listen.
them. Some people
Right.
just want to be heard. They just
That's
want to
right.
know that somebody understands. Somebody, even if somebody doesn't understand, because I'm young, there's a lot of things people can tell me I can't understand, but to show that I care, to show that
Right.
I'm considerate and I want to be a help and I want to learn how to help you out in this situation. And
Yeah.
it's and not making somebody feel like they're an outcast because they want to commit suicide, right? And that's not just with suicide, that's with anything we struggle with.
And but that's key what you just said. When somebody comes to you or you see those signs of suicide. So I saw this, and this is important. God is the giver of life, and if you take your own life, you are rejecting God's gift. Our
Mm-hmm.
life is a gift from God,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wise enough to know everybody don't believe in God, right? I understand
Right.
that. But all I know is God. That's all I've ever been taught since I was a young girl. I believe in him and I know that he's real. And, I remember a few people when I heard that they committed suicide. I know Robin Williams, he committed suicide. And I'm like, that man was a millionaire. What would make him commit suicide? And then when I was working at Kaiser, there was a lady, her husband committed suicide. Remember when I forgot what year it was, when the market first crashed? He lost everything. And instead of him trying to work it out with his wife and recover, he killed himself. And what you don't realize is that when you kill yourself, you leave the people behind to hurt. They carry so much blame. I have, God blessed me with four children, and I have three surviving. And, I remember my daughter when she first said that to me years ago. She was in her teenage years, and she said that she thought about suicide. I didn't understand, and I probably didn't respond in the most correct way, because sometimes if we haven't been through something to understand, we don't always respond.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, what I feel like she's beautiful inside and out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I'm like, well, what is it? You don't really want for anything. What is it? But my daughter lost her father when she was I think Sharice was, she was between 12 and 14. I don't know what that's like, right? Because I still had my father and my stepfather. I had found out I had a real dad. I didn't know that she was suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And to find out there's some things that happened that I didn't know about. So that's the other issue. When people reach out to you, don't be so quick to dismiss them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and just feel like, oh, they just crying out for help. I remember I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he said that a female had told him if he didn't be with her, she would commit suicide. But he was just like, well, you might as well kill yourself because I'm not going to be with you. And I was like, that's cruel. you know so just kind of knowing those signs. And sometimes people like attention. you know
Right. Right.
I don't think that they really mean it.
Right.
And just knowing. And then lately I've been hearing a lot of things in the news that, you know, to me, sometimes when they can't solve a crime or they don't have their facts, they'll say, oh, they tried to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to know your people. So
Mm-hmm.
let me just go on record. I'll never commit suicide, no matter the situation or circumstance. So if I come up in the river, I did not do that. I've had a lot of things that come up for me. I lost my child. That was one of the hardest thing I ever had to endure. I just didn't understand it.
Right.
You
Right.
know, called breast cancer. I never even thought about ending my life. Now, what I have said before is I've said things like, God, you left me here for this, you
Mm-hmm.
know. but it wasn't a sense of I wanted to harm myself, you know.
Right. Right.
And to tell you something funny, the night your sister died, it was either that night or the next night. I never forget it. Me and her dad was laying on the floor. Me and her dad was laying on the floor, and I just couldn't handle what was going on, and I remember saying, Lord, I can't be here. I couldn't do it.
Hmm.
And right at that moment, this is a true story. Right at that moment, it kind of felt like my spirit was kind of like leaving me, like I'm gonna be here. And right in that moment, I was like, God, I was like, forgive me, you know. And what I thought about was you and Sharice. I thought about, I'm like, oh wow, I still have two
Hmm.
other children here. How selfish of that would
Hmm.
it be of me to just give up? I still have two other children here,
Right.
you know. And
Right.
so just kind of being more aware. And I just want to pause and just encourage somebody today. You know, I did have somebody call me today. They're struggling with finances and they're having a hard time and they feel like, well, God, you've forgotten about me.
Right.
And it's not so much that God has forgotten about you. Sometimes, you know, He puts us through tests until we learn the lesson.
Hmm.
You know, I personally just went through a huge lesson, but I'm going to save that for another day. You know, I got the message
Hmm.
loud and clear. But to sit here and say that I've never, you know, just thought about what it would be like not to be here, I have. I
Hmm.
just never thought about like shooting myself or taking pills and ending my life. I just was like, God, man, what did you want me to learn from this? And I just
Right.
kind of prayed to Him. And it's been times where when I was sad, I would say, God, can you just let me sleep? And I'm telling you guys, He would let me sleep. Like when
Hmm.
it get to the point where I can't bear some things,
Hmm.
I'll ask Him and He'll let me sleep. I'll sleep it off. And that old saying, joy comes in the morning.
Hmm.
I'm a witness to it because in that morning there's a different, it's a new day, right? The
Right.
renewing of your mind. And so I just want to encourage somebody, you know, please call 1-800 suicide if you contemplate suicide. Or like my Minister Webster said, if you have somebody that you can trust, and I'm going to be honest, sometimes you can't always go to family. You can't always go to friends. You have to know
Hmm.
who to go to. You know, like, you know, I don't want to be insensitive, but I do have a family member that I love dearly. I wouldn't dare tell her I wanted to commit suicide because she would say something that would irritate my soul. She would. I just know it. She did it when I mentioned to her that I had cancer. So you have to know who to be able to go to. I have like two or three go to people that I can call when it's something serious or something
Hmm.
I go to. And it's good to know you have that, but some people might not have that. And when I on my way here, I stopped off and got me something to eat, and I was getting ready to throw away my food that I had for yesterday. And he's a homeless guy. He may have some mental issue, drug issues. He was like, "Can I get that bag of food?" And you know, I passed it to him, and I just felt bad, but I kind of just prayed over him and hope that he gets the help that he needs. You
Hmm.
know, so with that being said, I want to give um, Jen an opportunity, and then we're going to come back to you.
Okay.
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 I wanted to ask her a couple of questions. So can you switch out for me and let her just come?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can give her the earphones, honey.
Okay. There you go.
So welcome, welcome, welcome. I
Let me
need you
get
to
closer.
yeah scoot closer because we can't see you.
There you
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome to come and thank you for being on Stories of the Show radio show. Happy that you're here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So you are a mother of six and you are a wife. Um, you know, I know that, and I'll let you talk to it. I'm not going to say what I know. Has there ever been a time where you have thought about, you know, committing suicide um, or know of anyone who had those thoughts? And kind of what is your view on suicide?
I personally haven't had thoughts. I've been in a state of deep depression
Mm-hmm.
um, where I didn't know what my purpose or my value was in life.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, all with postpartum depression,
Mm-hmm.
but we can get into that in another time.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, taking my own life, no.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Um, I value my life. My babies are my number one priority.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I never personally thought of taking my life, but I do know someone who
Mm-hmm.
did,
Mm-hmm.
and it's my mom's friend.
Okay.
Her They were coworkers
Mm-hmm.
for about 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And during those 30 years, obviously, they developed a friendship and
Mm-hmm.
became really close. And I also had the opportunity to know her
Mm-hmm.
as a little girl all the way to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
So, from what I remember with her, she was such a strong person.
Mm-hmm.
She had a strong personality. Um, she wouldn't take any nonsense from anyone, you know. And she was such a good person. She always tried to help people. She
Mm-hmm.
always helped my mom.
Mm-hmm.
There were times where my mom, she didn't know how to stand up for herself
Mm-hmm.
at work, and she pushed her through it and helped her. And I always saw that, and as I became an adult, I always admired her for her
Mm-hmm.
personality. And my mom told me that she would go to lunch with her after they both were retired. They went to lunch together, and she met up with her. And I would say, I would tell her, I said hello. And one day, my mom calls me crying, and I said, "What's wrong?"
Mm-hmm.
And she told me that her friend passed. And I said, "What?" I said, "What happened?" In my mind, I thought it was maybe an illness or an accident. I was shocked and surprised when she said that she committed suicide. And I said, "What?" No. She said, "Yeah." And I began asking her so many questions like, why? What happened? What led to it? You know? I said, not too long ago, you guys were out at lunch. And what happened?
Mm-hmm.
She ended up becoming in such a deep state of depression. She no longer cared about her family or her friends or her husband. My mom was actually in communication with her husband to see how she was doing. She wanted to stop by and see her, bring her flowers, food. She didn't want to see anyone. And from my mom's perspective, she thinks that she became depressed because she was actually kind of getting bullied by her own brother. And her brother was just calling her, harassing her. And it all had to do with her mother,
Mm-hmm.
um, finances.
Mm-hmm.
And when people die,
Oh.
that's when the true colors come out from your own family, your own blood. And so my mom remembers her telling her, all these conversations that she would have with her brother,
Mm-hmm.
how he would harass her and she couldn't take it anymore. And my mama would say, "Hey, stand up. You're good for standing up for yourself." And I think because it was her brother,
Mm-hmm.
maybe she just took it differently.
Mm-hmm.
She would stand up for herself or anyone else, but it's like something about her brother. It took over.
Let me ask you this: when your mother told you that she actually committed suicide, if you can remember, what did you think? Did you feel like that was selfish of her, or more of we've lost she was like an auntie to you? How did that make you feel when you found out she tried to commit suicide, or she did rather?
I felt sad.
Mm-hmm.
I felt really sad because I've known her since I was a little girl. And it wasn't just a hi type of thing when I
Mm-hmm.
would visit my mom at work. We actually would go out together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had a good relationship, and so I was shocked. I was hurt. Um, I wasn't so much confused
Mm-hmm.
because I know that just by reading stories, when people get into a different state of mind,
Mm-hmm.
they don't think about how they're going to hurt their family
Mm-hmm.
or their loved ones or their friends. So I don't sit there and think, how could they do that? How that's selfish of them for leaving their loved ones behind with all that hurt and pain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I don't think that's their intention.
Do you know how she committed suicide?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
don't.
Okay.
Her husband went to the store, came back home and found her dead.
Do you think it's possible to detect suicide? Do we give off signs? Or a better question is, like earlier when I spoke to, you have six children, right? Do you think that you have a close enough relationship with them that they would come to you and be like, Mom, I'm going through something, I'm struggling with something, that they would come to you? Because I've been reading a lot that teenagers, young people are killing themselves. And I
Hmm.
would be like, well, they didn't go to their mother, they didn't tell them. Have you had that conversation with them?
I've had conversations with them, and I've always had conversations with them, letting them know to come to me if they have an issue with anything,
Mm-hmm.
if they feel anything negative. Um, I want that open relationship with them because I don't feel like I had that with my mom. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
had to go behind her back. She was strict, which
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't feel like I was able to bring certain topics to her and speak
Mm-hmm.
to her about it. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to do that with my kids. So my
Mm-hmm.
kids are actually very open.
They are. They tell everything, by the way, so don't do nothing in front of them.
Yeah, they're pretty open. Like, I mean, from the littlest to the oldest, they just tell me anything that they're feeling, what they're going through,
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciate that. And I always make sure not to yell at them
Mm-hmm.
or judge them or make them feel like they can't come to me, because the last thing I want is for them not to trust me or feel like they can't express to me what they're feeling or going through.
I was just thinking about something. This is kind of funny, but it's not funny. So when my children was younger, they like messing with me, and I remember Timmy and Sharice asked me a question. You know what I'm gonna say? They was messing with me. And this is now. Let me just say this. This was in my immature days. They says, "Mom, if we told you we were gay, would you still love us?" I was like, "No." But I knew that they were playing with me, you know. But it's important when our children come to you, right? And I'm just thinking about, you know, I don't want to say, but there are certain people who children who may be born a male and then they say they want to be a female. I look at all the bullying statements on social media. I don't understand it. They need love and support, and we need to be careful on how we respond to them. And just judging people in general. How I want to ask my audience, how would you handle if your child or your friend call you or come to you and said they was thinking about committing suicide? Would you know what to say? Would you know how to handle it? So I've decided as of today that I am going to partner with suicide prevention. And I'm going to get all the training that I can get because I do want to be a voice. I do want to empower, inspire, and encourage other people to survive. I've heard the saying, and it's my motto, never give up, right?
Hmm.
Although I've had some people say, well, some stuff people need to give up. Well, for example, like I love music and I always wanted to be a singer. Well, God didn't bless me to be a singer. But it's things that I can do. I could take some singing classes to help me with tone. Now I know I'm not gonna have a number one hit record, you know,
Hmm.
because I can't sing. But just knowing how to handle when life challenges come up, I pray that you two never. Actually, I don't wish this on the enemy. Losing a child is one of the hardest things that I've ever in my life had to endure, and I ask God to not let me go through that again. I don't want to lose another child. It's unbearable, you know. But God gave us life, and I'm praying that we all cherish our life. You know, for me, going through breast cancer, I'm more appreciative of life.
Hmm.
So when I go through things, I'm not saying it don't affect me, but it kind of rolls off me. I'm like, okay, God, what message, what lesson is it that you want me to learn today? And so I kind of just go from there. And educate your children. Like I said, stop relying on the school system to teach your children important things like that. I didn't talk to my children much coming up about self love and suicide. But there's an old saying, when you know better, you do better. But I'm on top of it with my grandchildren, and it's funny because Timmy said that he don't, always want to tell them they're pretty and all this kind of stuff. Every chance I get, I tell them I love them. I tell them they're beautiful inside and out, because I want them to know that. And I think it's important that we sow into their lives, right? I love kids. I'm a volunteer for different organizations, Oakland Reach, working with the Oakland Unified School District. I'm a liaison, and, I'm part of other different ministries. And I just want to empower somebody today. If you're contemplating, if you know someone who thought about suicide, go ahead and call 1-800 suicide or 1-800-273-8255. Jen, I want to thank you for sharing that story with me. Thank you for coming. I'm going to have you back. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but whatever it is, it's going to be good and juicy.
It is. It is.
So thank you, thank you, thank
And
you.
one more thing.
Yes, absolutely.
I know suicide typically shows more with adults,
Mm-hmm.
middle age, as well as teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
But kids as young as 5 and 6 years old have committed suicide.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And from 2019 to now, it's doubled. It was about 2,500. Now it's 5,200, 5,300. And there's not a lot of focus on that,
It's not.
you know. But we have to take in consideration little kids asking questions about how it feels to die, or where do I go when I die, or how do I die, or actually taking action upon themselves to kill themselves, to commit suicide because they're being bullied at school. And it doesn't necessarily have to be bullying, it could be whatever they're going through at home,
That's right.
you know? Um, for a child that young to even think about that and contemplate it and actually go through with it says a lot.
That's a bigger issue. That
That's
goes
a big
to
issue.
of knowing, because each one of your children is different. Each one of them have a different temperament, and I'm just thinking about the personality of my three grandchildren. You probably would have to talk to all three of them in a different
Mm-hmm.
way,
Mm-hmm.
based on what they can handle.
Mm-hmm.
That's just heartbreaking to hear a child as young as 5 years old. What could be so bad that they would take their own life, that they don't know that they have a voice, that
Mm-hmm.
they have somebody that they can talk to? And so that's why I'm glad that I was able to do this show about suicide awareness and prevention, because it's important, and a lot of people don't like you to say things to their children, but if you see somebody in help say something,
Mm-hmm.
they could possibly save a child's life.
Even if they ask questions about
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
just take it into consideration, because naturally we're going to think, oh, they're 5 years old. They don't know.
Yes, they
But
do.
they do. Kids are really smart. So, just for anyone out there, if they ever experience that, and I pray they don't, but if they ever do, there is help for young kids as well.
Thank
So,
you. We
yeah.
appreciate that.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, come on, Mr. Webster. Let's close it out. Got like about 15 minutes. That was a lot of good information. 5 years old. That's Suicide is never good at any age, but I have a love for children, and our youth, and to be in those type of situations to where they actually commit suicide again. That number, 1.38 million suicide attempts in the year of 2019. That's huge. You know. All right, go
And
ahead,
I was
Timmy.
going to say, just looking at a couple of the comments, um, Sister Carolyn Cobbs put, "We mask very good behind depression," um, and then she also put people pleasing has a lot to do with it as well. But again, I think that masking goes back into, because it's not accepted as much to just be transparent and open about how you really feel. And I think we're afraid of the that response that's going to come, right? Just like, you said, there's certain things that you couldn't say to certain people. My wife was talking about certain things she couldn't say to her mom. It's not that she didn't want to, she want to. She just feels like it won't be received without some type of criticism or bashing, or maybe sometime, the people we're influenced, we're around, may not have the best answer that can help us. So we decide to just not say anything, right? And we just kind of go day to day, pretending like everything's okay. And I mean, you can only do that for so long, and when you research even suicide, a lot of time it's not they just wake up and I want to kill myself today. Nah, it's 30 years of since childhood being molested, right? Since childhood being raped, right? Since childhood being abused, since being married two times, being abused by birth, and the man leaving you for her best friend. It's through all of that, and you lose a child, and then you lose your grandma, and then you get your pink slip at your job. It's just all those burdens together, and not having a place to just kind of release and reset. And I'd like to add, not having an active relationship with God to be able to bring you back, or just somebody to connect, to kind of revive you, if I can put it that way. So I think there's a lot of that too. And I also had in my notes here, when we were kind of chatting earlier, we kind of got a few questions going a lot of different directions, but um, a reference from the Bible. You were asking me earlier on suicide. I was thinking about Judas, right? When after Judas, he committed suicide because he regretted the decision that he had made. And there are some people, I think, who may commit suicide because they feel like they've done something wrong, and they've done something so terrible because they've been taught, that certain sins are unforgivable, and they just decide that they can't get over what they've done, that it's haunting them, so they figure it's better not to be alive, and that's not the case. God forgives all. And and to add to that, I put in my notes, Paul wrote majority of the New Testament and is commonly referenced in leadership and doctrine, yet he used to persecute Christians, right? Paul wrote majority of the New Testament, and we speak the words that God inspired to Paul to write. But Paul used to kill Christians, he used to kill people, right? Right. So I'm saying that to say he still had value, right? No matter what you've done, if you whatever you've committed or done wrong, or um, you feel like you can't live life because of what you've done or is haunting you, you still have value, and you can use what you've done wrong as an opportunity to help others, to prevent them from doing it. So if you're that person, no matter what you've done, God still loves you. And that's one of the most craziest things about being a Christian and a believer. It makes no sense. It's really not fair. Like, we serve a faithful God. We don't deserve to be here. But no matter what you've done, God still loves you. Like, that's crazy when you really just wrap that around and you really think about it, right? And so that can be used, as an encouragement. You're valuable. God still has something for you to do and accomplish, no matter what you've done. If you fall in that category of wanting to commit suicide because of what you've done in the past.
Yeah, that's good information. So what is it that we can do, right?
Hmm.
What is it that we can do as a community to educate people, starting at 5 years old? How do we get this out to the masses about suicide prevention, about seeing those signs,
Hmm.
thinking back over it, there's certain signs people have shown me that they might have necessarily been suicidal.
Hmm.
How do you have that conversation, without offending someone? And another thing is, I read somewhere where they said men commit more suicide than women.
Absolutely.
And but see, for me, I'm not a man, so I don't know if that's how come I can't wrap my mind around it. But I was just like, wow, you know. Then it doesn't mean that a man is weak. I just think that, for example, of some of the people that I know that were males, why they left on record, why they committed suicide, is because they felt like they couldn't provide for their family. You know, I don't know. How can
Well,
we?
we're taught not to cry, and not to be soft or wimp, or not to express emotion, and I think that can have some effects on holding certain things in. Like, I don't like to cry, and I don't know if it's a pride thing, or if I don't know. I just don't like to cry. There's the different things in my life and experience where I do want to, but I fight against it because I have this thing in my mind that men shouldn't cry. Now, I know that it's not true, but that's just was such embedded in my foundation
Mm-hmm.
that I have to fight against myself. It's okay to cry. Even if you want to cry by yourself, just go in the
Mm-hmm.
room, close the door, and just cry. That's what you feel like you need to do to get it out. Aside from talking to somebody and even praying to God, and be express yourself in the best way that you can to deal with whatever you're coping with. And I think that is a difference between men and women. Women commonly are more expressive emotionally, and
Mm-hmm.
men are not. Statistically, more men have actually committed suicide than women. But what's interesting about the statistics is that more women contemplate the attempt of suicide,
That is true.
but more men actually commit
Mm-hmm.
suicide, right? And so, that's very interesting, right? You know, women think about it, but they don't do it. Right? They contemplate it, but they well, hold on. I don't know any more information on that. But my wife was speaking, and she was on point with the age range. You see high numbers between the ages of 15 to 44. And the highest number of statistics for this is for African American is the ages of 25 to 34 is the highest and when suicides are committed. But from the ages from 5 through 4, that's on there as well. And so, it's definitely something that's serious. You asked a question about how can we improve it, and it's like any other thing we're dealing with in life, right? COVID is not the only pandemic. We got a lot of them. That's just the only one that we seem to focus
Mm-hmm.
on. But social injustice, it's got to be talked about more. Suicide, it's got to be talked about more. Domestic violence, it's got to be talked about more. These things have to be brought to the surface in a conscious way, non-aggressive, hurting way, so that we're aware about it, so we can be intentional about being more attentive as parents to our kids, being more attentive as husbands to our wives, being more attentive as wives to our husbands, to our mothers to sons, right? To be more, because the more the more it gives you the opportunity to do better and have a better impact for better results.
I was just sitting here thinking, this is funny. I didn't know what I wanted to talk about on my first show, and when I discovered that Friday, Friday I discovered that September 5th, which is today, was the actual beginning day of suicide awareness. I was just riled. You always know when you are in alignment with the Creator, because I was in awe when I realized that it wasn't planned at all. You
Hmm.
know, because I had seen something and I'm like, is this Suicide Awareness Month? Because I know when breast cancer awareness is, that's in
Hmm.
October. Oh, and
Hmm.
by the way, next month I'll be talking about breast cancer awareness. If there's anybody that ever wants to be on my show, you can email me and at believe radio Yolanda at gmail.com. You can be a guest on my show. Reach out to me. I air every Sunday from 3:30 to 4:30. You know, if there's a topic that you would like to talk about, or if you want to market your business. And I've had a wonderful time. It seemed like time just flew. We got like 5 more minutes
Hmm.
to finish up, but this is an important topic, and I wanted to play the song "I Need You to Survive" by, is it Hezekiah Walker that made that song? I absolutely love that song. So when you get an opportunity, go to YouTube and listen to that song. I listened to it and it touches my heart. We need you to survive. We all have a purpose in life, and all of us are at a different place. There's people who are not married, wish they were married. There's people who would love to be in a house. There's people who want a different job. There's people who want a different body. There's all these different, but no, it's true.
I know, I know.
Some women want a bigger, whatever. And
Right.
my thing is that I personally have learned to be comfortable in my own skin. And I can say that with conviction. I didn't always know how to love myself. I really didn't even really know what that was about. I was always taught God is love.
Hmm.
What does that really mean, though? Just think about it. You young,
Hmm.
and you tell a child God is love. Okay, what does that really mean, right? I
Right.
never had nobody sewing to me, and coming up, I struggled with feeling loved. I didn't know I was loved, and it played
Hmm.
a big role. But God has blessed me that I love myself enough. If nobody on this earth loved me, I love myself enough to keep going and to make it, and that's important. So, I want to encourage somebody today. If you're down or you're depressed, you thought about hurting yourself or someone, go ahead and call 1-800-273-8255. And, if you reach out to me, at my believe radio Yolanda at gmail.com, hey, if you're struggling with something, I will do my best to help you. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm just somebody that's sharing my life experiences, what I've gone through. All right.
And one thing I want to add too, what is the most common method of suicide? I looked that up, and I didn't know this, but it's with a gun. That's the most common way. And statistically, men, use they say men use the worst of them, but it's aside from the gun, that's 52% of suicide. But it's hanging, it's suffocating, it's jumping, it's moving objects, sharp objects, vehicles, drowning, self poisoning. Those are the many different methods, different methods of suicide. But gun is the most used.
Yeah, my heart goes out to anyone that, has struggled with that, and I, I don't understand, because I just don't want to harm myself. I don't want to be selfish, you know. My kids always tease me about who loved me more, but I just wouldn't want to put them through that, Now, if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. That's one thing,
Right.
but to tragically take my life before, it's time for me to go, I just, it's discouraging to me.
Right. Right.
So to anyone listening, just know that you are loved. You are here for a reason. You have a purpose. Timothy, thank you for being on my show. I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
I plan on having you back. We could talk about some other stuff. I got some good stuff to talk about. And yeah, some real good stuff when your wife not here. My show is to empower, encourage, and uplift others. Email me, believe radio Yolanda at gmail.com if you would like to be on my show. Thank you for listening. Could you read off the list who's all on here? I know First Lady Cobbs is on here. Thank you for listening. My other son, Dondrell, is on here. Thank you for listening. Who else is on here? If you can
Uh,
tell, I can't tell.
it's all good.
Adam, thank you so much. Curtis, thank you so much. Adam came Thursday evening, stayed late the night before his birthday, helping me get everything together. Curtis, thank you so much. He has the Crazy Blessed show. I appreciate you. Who else is on there?
It doesn't
Oh,
show
okay.
everybody who's on. It only shows who comments or who allows you to see.
Thank you everyone for listening. Tune in next Sunday at 3:30 p.m. I'm going to have another guest, and I'm excited. This is just the beginning. Tune in. Thank you.
And I'm glad that you said that you would not commit suicide because if you did, we wouldn't be able to get that insurance money.
You know what?
I'm
On
just
that
kidding.
note,
This is my mom. I love her, but I'm serious.
your name is coming